Hi Reddit. This is my first post here, and I'm using a throwaway account because I don't want this tied to my main one. Honestly, I'm not even sure why I'm doing this. Maybe I'm looking for some support, maybe for clarity, or perhaps I just need to vent. Either way, here I am, pouring my heart out to a group of strangers online. Let me introduce myself. My name's Amelia, and for the sake of anonymity, let's call my ex-boyfriend Tom. Tom and I were together for about 5 years, and for a while, things were great, until they weren't. Here's the thing about me, I've always been a prankster. Scratch that, I've always been a huge prankster. It's just who I am, or at least, it used to be. There's something incredibly satisfying about pulling off a well-executed prank. And Tom? He was no exception. In fact, he was my favorite target. When we first started dating, my pranks were harmless. They were cute, even. I'd do things like leave sticky notes with funny messages all over his apartment or swap his coffee for decaf just to see if he noticed. He'd roll his eyes, give me this little smirk that I absolutely lived for, and that would be the end of it. But here's the thing, Tom wasn't, and still isn't, much of a prank enthusiast. He didn't hate them, at least not in the beginning, but I could tell they weren't really his thing. He's the kind of guy who thrives on structure and predictability, whereas I thrive on a little chaos. Early on, though, he didn't complain. I think he saw it as one of my quirks, something that came with the territory of dating me. Since my pranks were relatively harmless back then, he just rolled with it. He'd laugh, maybe give me a playful lecture about how I was going to scare him to death one day, and I'd think it was all part of the fun. Looking back, though, I realize he wasn't enjoying them as much as I thought. He tolerated them because he cared about me, not because he actually liked being the target. At the time, though, I didn't pick up on that. To me, it was just fun and games, and since he never outright complained, I assumed everything was fine. Things shifted when a friend casually suggested I start vlogging or create a couple's account. She said my pranks would totally blow up on social media. At first, I laughed it off. I wasn't the type to put myself out there like that. I barely posted on my personal accounts, so the idea of creating content felt overwhelming and out of character. Then, life threw me a curveball. I lost my job, not because of anything I did, but because the company was downsizing. Even though I was actively looking for something new, the process was slow and disheartening. With too much time on my hands and anxiety weighing me down, I started spending more time on social media. At first, it was just a distraction. But the more I scrolled, the more I got sucked into this world of couples accounts, prank videos, and viral challenges. I noticed that what they were doing wasn't so different from what I already did with Tom. The only difference? They were filming it, editing it, and sharing it with the world. And they were making money from it. That part stuck with me. Some of these creators had sponsorships, ads, and even merchandise. They'd turned their antics into actual careers. The idea intrigued me. I wasn't a content creator, and I didn't know the first thing about editing or building an audience. But being unemployed, I couldn't stop thinking about the possibility. What if I could make this work? What if our page took off? It seemed like a perfect opportunity, something I already enjoyed doing could become a career. One evening, I casually brought it up to Tom. I framed it as a fun idea, trying not to overwhelm him. He gave me a look, one that clearly said he wasn't into it but didn't want to argue. He shrugged and said I could do what I wanted as long as he wasn't involved. At first, I felt a bit deflated. I'd hoped he'd be more excited or want to join in. But since he didn't outright say no, I decided to move forward. I threw myself into it, researching how to start a channel, filming tutorials, and editing basics. I bought a ring light, a tripod, and beginner-friendly editing software. I wanted to do it right. I started small, just harmless little pranks. My first video was a classic, a fake spider on the toilet seat. Tom's reaction was perfect, he jumped back, shouted, and then laughed when he realized it was fake. I edited it, added music, and uploaded it. To my surprise, it got a decent number of views. Encouraged, I kept going. Another prank involved switching sugar for salt in his coffee. Again, harmless fun. Tom gave his usual annoyed but amused reaction, and I made sure to cut the video before he got too grumpy. At first, it was thrilling. I loved creating content and seeing people enjoy it. But soon, decent views weren't enough. I wanted to go viral. So, I started pushing the limits. The pranks became bigger and riskier. One time, I pretended the Wi-Fi was out for a day, knowing Tom relied on it for work. Another time, I faked spilling juice on his favorite shirt. Tom's reactions grew less amused and more irritated, but I brushed it off. I was so focused on chasing success that I ignored the warning signs. The worst prank? I called him during a meeting to say the house had burned down, complete with a fake photo. He panicked, cancelled his meeting, and rushed home. When he realized it was a joke, he was livid. I apologized, but in my mind, it was harmless because no real damage had been done. Looking back, I see how wrong I was. But at the time, I was blinded by the idea of success. They weren't terrible, but they also weren't anywhere near the viral sensation I had been aiming for. My videos were pulling in a few thousand views here and there, but nothing close to what would make me an internet star or turn content creation into my full-time gig. That's when I realized I needed to step things up. Yes, looking back, I see how stupid it was, so stupid, but at the time, I kept convincing myself, one big hit, just one viral video, and it would all be worth it. Then New Year's Eve came around. The idea first sparked while scrolling through TikTok. I stumbled across this couple's prank video, not exactly what I eventually did, but it lit a fire in my head. In their video, they had pulled an elaborate prank, making one of them believe they'd won the lottery, only to reveal it was fake. Their reactions were way over the top, and the video had gone absolutely viral, millions of views, thousands of comments. It was everything I dreamed of for myself. That's when inspiration hit me. If they could do it, why couldn't I? I didn't want to copy their prank outright, I wanted to go even bigger, something that would get people talking and sharing like crazy. After all, it was New Year's Eve. What better time to pull off a grand prank and kick off the new year with a bang? I spent hours planning, running through ideas in my head for how to make it work. I wanted it to be shocking, unforgettable, and, most importantly, hilarious, or so I kept telling myself. Deep down, though, I think I just craved the attention. I wanted the likes, the shares, the comments. I was desperate to go viral, no matter the cost. That's when I landed on the idea, a cheating prank. Yes, I know now it was the dumbest idea ever, but at the time, I thought it was genius. My goal was to make it utterly convincing, something so outrageous and over the top that everyone would be talking about it. I roped in a friend, Jake, to help me out. Jake was skeptical from the start, constantly asking, "Are you sure about this? This could go really wrong." Honestly, that should have been my red flag. If Jake, who's normally super laid back, was uncomfortable, I should have stopped. But I didn't. I kept insisting it was just a harmless prank, all in good fun, and that it would make for an incredible video. After way too much convincing, Jake reluctantly agreed. The plan seemed simple enough, or so I thought. My boyfriend, Tom, was getting home that evening from a 3-day business trip. I had a general idea of when he'd arrive, assuming there weren't any delays. So we set everything up accordingly. Jake came over that evening, and we started prepping. I made sure the camera was hidden perfectly to capture everything at the ideal angle. Then we staged the scene, we climbed into bed, stripped down, just enough to make it believable, and got under the sheets. The idea was to make it look like Tom had walked in on us in the middle of, well, you know. When I heard Tom's car pull into the driveway, my focus was entirely on how this would play out on camera. I was imagining the reactions, the comments, the shares. I didn't stop to think for even a second about what Tom's real reaction might be. As soon as he stepped through the door, Jake and I started making loud, exaggerated noises, ridiculously over the top, in my opinion. I thought it was hilarious. Tom clearly didn't. He stormed upstairs, obviously drawn by the sounds, and burst into the bedroom. The look on his face when he saw us under the sheets, it wasn't confusion or even anger at first. It was pure, heart-wrenching pain. That pain, however, quickly transformed into fury. Tom yanked the sheets off of us, and before I could even get a word out, he was screaming. I started laughing. It was a joke, a prank. I kept saying, "It's a prank, babe. It's just a prank." But he wasn't laughing. Not even close. Jake, meanwhile, looked like he wanted to vanish into thin air. He kept muttering, "It's a prank, man, it's not real," but Tom wasn't listening. Tom turned back to me, his voice cold and unwavering, and told me to leave. He said he was done, that he couldn't take it anymore. He demanded I get out of his house immediately. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. It was meant to be funny. We were supposed to laugh about it afterward, maybe even stage a fake argument for the camera before I revealed the prank. But this? This wasn't part of the plan. I tried to calm him down, to explain that it was all fake, but he wasn't having any of it. He said he didn't care, that it wasn't funny, that I was toxic and he wanted me gone. Jake, clearly uncomfortable and feeling like an unwelcome third wheel in what had turned into a very real argument, mumbled an awkward apology and left. I didn't even try to stop him, I was too stunned. The argument that followed felt like it lasted forever. Tom was unrelenting, repeating the same thing over and over. I needed to leave. He didn't want me there anymore. Slowly, it began to sink in that he was serious, that this wasn't just a temporary outburst. Eventually, I gave up. I packed a bag while sobbing uncontrollably, my hands trembling as I shoved clothes into it. I couldn't believe this was happening. Tom called an Uber for me, somehow, that made it even worse, like he couldn't even stand to drive me himself.